We're recording. Hello, everyone. I am librarian for the Livermore Public Library and your host, Paul Sevilla. I welcome you all to our special program this evening. But first, some housekeeping. Participants, save for the panelists, are muted and their videos turned off. It's because we have such a large gathering, and I see we have about 59 people already here. Welcome. If you would like to ask a question, click the chat button on the bottom of your screen. I ask, though, that you refrain from using chat during the performance. We will have a question and answer portion after the show. Right now, I am sharing with you all on the chat a link to a document with details about tonight's show, as well as a link to the program survey that you can fill out after the program. You should see those links on the chat box right now. We are recording this program, and it will be viewable on the Livermore's Public Library's YouTube channel in a few days. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Friends of the Livermore Public Library as part of the 15th annual Livermore Reads Together community-wide reading program, featuring the graphic novel series March, co-written by John Lewis and Andrew A. Din, and illustrated by Nate Powell. Many thanks to the Livermore Shakespeare Festival for organizing tonight's Readers Theater, especially to the volunteer readers from Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And now, to introduce the readers, the director of this March Readers Theater, Donna Blevins.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to my fellow marchers who are going to bring so much passion and feeling to this important story. March is divided into 3 books. The voice of John Lewis will be spoken for Book 1 by Tony Bayliss. Book 2 will be Lorenzo Wells. And Book 3, they will take turns sharing the role. All the other roles will be played by the supporting cast in order of appearance: Julia Ramirez, Jennifer Nelson, AJ Lanier, and Monique Warren. And we'll see you on the other side of the bridge for Q&A after this 45-minute program. John Robert Lewis was an American politician, statesman, civil rights activist, and leader who served in the U.S. House of Representatives for Georgia's 5th Congressional District from 1987 until his death in 2020. He was one of the Big 6 leaders who organized the 1963 March on Washington. In 1965, he led the first of 3 Selma to Montgomery marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. In an incident which became known as Bloody Sunday, state troopers and police attacked the marchers, including John Lewis.
Selma, Alabama, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, March 7th, 1965. This is an unlawful assembly. You are ordered to disperse and go back to your churches or your homes. Troopers, advance.
Book 1, the early years. We lived on 110 acres of cotton, corn, and peanut fields in a little corner of Pike County, Alabama. My father bought it in the spring of 1940 for $300 cash. As a child, my parents gave me the responsibility of taking care of our family's chickens. What I really wanted to be was a preacher. An uncle gave me a Bible for Christmas. When I was 5, I could read it by myself and I preached to my chickens. I would get them all into the hen house and settle them in their roosts. They would sit quietly and listen, but they never would say amen. In the summer of 1951, I took my first trip north with an uncle. There were no restaurants we could stop, so we carried our own food. Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. These were the states we had to be careful in. We finally reached Buffalo, and I was full of excitement. My uncle's house had white people living next door to them on both sides. I rode my first escalator. I bought a small bag of candy that I tried to make last forever. After that trip, home in Alabama never felt the same. Neither did I. When I started school, I was in heaven. Our librarian, Corinne Harvey, was so kind.
Come to the library as often as you can. We have literature books of all cultures. Here's Ebony, Jet, the Chicago Defender. My dear children, read everything.
But going to school was a luxury for my family that we really couldn't always afford. There was planning to be done. I begged my parents, but I was needed at home. And so I hid. As the others made their way to the fields, I would just slip away and wait for the sound of the school bus. My father said,
Never do that again.
I was certain he would tan my hide, but he never did. I did it again, and he would scold me again. But this was a life decision I had made, and it was near impossible to turn me away from it. It was the beginning of getting into good trouble. In my freshman year came this headline: segregation in schools outlawed. I was excited, but my parents said,
Don't get into trouble. Don't get in the way.
one Sunday morning in 1955, I heard a young preacher on the radio. I felt that he was preaching right directly to me. It was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In December of that year, Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus.
If you don't move, I'll be forced to call the police and they will arrest you.
You may do just that.
My family didn't know Rosa Parks, but they knew plenty of women like her. She was arrested. Dr. King led a boycott of those buses. The day before I was 16, I preached my first public sermon. I was nervous, but when I warmed up, the congregation warmed up to me. The Montgomery Advertiser took my picture and printed a story about the boy preacher. I was studying about justice when there were brave people working to make it happen. I was restless. I applied to Troy State, close to home, where no Black student was allowed. I decided to introduce myself to the only person who I thought would understand, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I exchanged phone calls with Reverend Ralph Abernathy and Dr. King's lawyer, Fred Gray, who represented Rosa Parks. I took the bus to Montgomery. I'd never seen a lawyer before, Black or white. Dr. King and a group of men greeted me.
So you're John Lewis, the young man who wants to desegregate Troy State. You're not old enough to file a suit. You'll have to get your parents' permission. To attend, we'll have to sue the state of Alabama and the Board of Education. We will help you, but you must keep in mind that your parents could lose their jobs. Your family home could get burned. You need to go back to Troy and talk it over with them.
My parents were supportive, but also scared for themselves and for the neighbors and friends. They didn't want anything to do with the lawsuit. I went back to school at the First Baptist Church in Nashville. Here, I met Jim Lawson, a graduate student of the Divinity School at Vanderbilt. He represented the Fellowship of Reconciliation. His words liberated me.
Our philosophy is nonviolent commitment for desegregation to eradicate some of the evils we all face. The evil of racism, the evil of poverty, the evil of war. We must learn how to disarm our attackers by connecting with their humanity, how to protect each other, how to survive, and how to love, and not let them shake our faith.
In November 1959, we started with test sit-ins at department store counters. Our plan was simple: ask to be served, and when we were refused, we would leave.
I am not allowed to serve you. It's our policy not to serve colored people here.
What about the white students? Can they be served?
No, I'm sorry. They're with you, so they can't be served either.
We were always refused. Our numbers grew, though, all over the South. The sit-ins were peaceful, but we were called names, threatened, and finally met with violence. In February 1960, I was arrested for the first of many times. 82 of us went to jail that day. We sang in the cells. At the counters, students filled all the empty seats. We were released from jail, tried in court, found guilty, sent back to jail, and released again. A boycott of the department stores began. This led to partial integration, which was still partial segregation. When a house was bombed near Tennessee State, a march was organized at City Hall. We met with Mayor West, who addressed the crowd.
Mayor West, we are outraged at this bombing. It's America, no one was killed. This has gone too far.
I will do everything I can to enforce the laws without prejudice.
Mr. Mayor, will you use the prestige of your office to appeal to citizens to stop racial discrimination?
Friends, we are all Christians together, so let's pray together.
How about eating together?
I appeal to all of us to end discrimination, to have no bigotry no bias, no hatred.
Do you recommend all lunch counters be desegregated?
Yes,
In May 1960, those 6 Nashville stores served food to Black customers for the first time in the city's history.
Book 2, Freedom Riders. When my parents found out I had been arrested, they were devastated. I was an embarrassment, a source of humiliation and gossip. I saw my parents less frequently. Nashville and the growing student movement became my home. In the fall of 1960, John F. Kennedy became president. What that would mean for us, I did not know. We expanded our campaign to non-violently desegregate. But what we found in the deeper segregated society was more violence. We were refused service and admittance. We were labeled as troublemakers and called names. We were attacked and beaten, and we were arrested. My response to all of this, we're going to march. I saw an ad in the student newspaper, Freedom Ride 1961. I wrote to them, I know that education is important, and I hope to get one, but humanity, human dignity is the most important thing in my life. In April 1961, I saw Washington, D.C. for the very first time in my life, and it was magical. I moved into the fellowship house run by Quakers as a headquarters for pacifist organizations. The group leader was James Farmer, who welcomed me as a freedom rider and introduced me to the group, a mix of Black and white men and women of all ages. Before boarding buses to New Orleans, James Farmer addressed our group.
I have faith in your ability to meet any challenge, but I also want you to know that I'm the only person obligated to go on this trip. You're free to choose whether to join me. If there's an arrest, we will accept that arrest. If there's violence, we will accept that violence without responding in kind. We will not pay fines because we feel that by paying money to a segregated state, we would help it perpetuate segregation.
We were met with violence at every stop as we continued to Birmingham. Our buses were attacked and burned. No police came to rescue or even investigate. We were the ones to get arrested for civil disobedience. The freedom buses were stopped and we were stranded.
We can't let them stop us with violence. There's a house. Let's knock on that door. Please, sir, let us in. We're freedom riders and we need help.
Come in, come in. You need to rest and eat something. Here's the telephone, call for help.
Someone drove from Nashville to pick us up and bring us back to the Birmingham bus station. We were met with violent people who wanted to kill us. It was Floyd Mann, Alabama's public safety director, a white man who saved our lives when he stepped in front of the crowd to stop the beatings.
I'll shoot the next man who hits anyone. There will be no killing here today.
May 22nd, 1961, the First Baptist Church in Montgomery was bombed. Dr. King flew in to join us. More than 1,500 of us met at Ralph Abernathy's church. We poured our hearts out in the words and music and song. A mob was forming outside the church, and Dr. King got a call from the Attorney General, Robert F. Kennedy.
Reverend, what the Freedom Riders agreed to a cooling off period. I know that the situation is desperate. A large contingent of U.S. Marshals is on their way. That would give us time with state authorities to work out a solution.
When the federal marshals arrived, Alabama National Guard sent them away. We were called agitators. We were surrounded and kept inside the church. We were bused to Mississippi and jailed at the penitentiary called the Parchman Farm. Parchman was the stuff of legends, dark legends of human bondage. But by the end of the summer, dozens more buses carried daughters and sons into the hearts of the Deep South to carry on the work we had begun. The Freedom Riders stirred a national consciousness and awoke the hearts and minds of a generation. The federal government responded. We became a national movement. August 1963, the March on Washington was underway. I was asked to give a speech to the thousands present. We march here today for jobs and freedom, but we have nothing to be proud of, for hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here. They're receiving starvation wages or no wages. There are students in jail on false charges. One man, one vote is the African cry. It must be ours too. We shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and the democracy. After the program was over, we were invited to the White House to meet President Kennedy.
I heard your speech, Mr. Lewis. You did a good job.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was the last time I saw President Kennedy alive.
Book 3, Freedom Riders.
September 15th, 1963. We interrupt this broadcast for a breaking news bulletin. There has been a bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham.
Fear gripped Birmingham. The killings did not stop. The teenagers who shot 13-year-old Virgil Lamar were Eagle Scouts coming from a Klan rally. I arrived at Birmingham bus terminal. Julian Bond, founder of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, had arrived from Atlanta. We went to the church together. Once the smoke cleared, 21 children laid injured and 4 young girls were dead. Dr. King spoke at the funeral, saying,
They say to us that we must be concerned, not merely about who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, and the philosophy of the murderers.
George Wallace started his term as governor of Alabama, declaring segregation forever. We decided to step up our activities in Selma, registering Black voters. I became the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I had more determination than ever. We are going to stay in Selma until every person of color can register to vote. Monday, October 7, 1963, became known as Freedom Day, with the largest voter mobilization yet.
In the South, it was almost impossible for us to register to vote. We were given different forms to fill out, told to write essays. We were asked to count the number of jelly beans in a jar.
We refused to give up. We formed a larger protest at Selma University. We were attacked by police, arrested for unlawful assembly, and taken to the Selma prison farm.
The author James Baldwin came to offer support. It was a hot day. We stood for hours and we were not allowed to leave the line for water or the bathroom, or we would not be allowed to return.
Many of us were on the verge of collapse, but we held our ground. When the courthouse closed at 4:30, only a few people were able to see the registrar. Still, we felt it was a victory.
After release from prison, I began giving speeches and raising money. Our movement was taken to Mississippi. It was led by Bob Moses, a graduate of Harvard philosophy and in part, it was led by Bob Moses, a graduate of Harvard who was smart and gentle. He avoided the spotlight partly because of his personal philosophy and partly because being African American and too well known in Mississippi could be deadly. He was joined by Al Lowenstein, a white activist and former dean of Stanford University. They conceived of the idea of a mock election to take place at the same time as the actual statewide election. It became known as the Freedom Vote. There were concerns within our group that white workers were trying to take over. Bob Moses, again, was a voice of reason.
We cannot do this alone. We need white people working alongside us. It changes the complexion of what we're doing. It isn't Negro fighting against white. It's rational people against irrational people. The one thing we can do for this country that no one else can do is be above the race issue.
No person represented us more than Fannie Lou Hamer. She went to the courthouse to register. She was fired from her job, arrested, and severely beaten. But she joined SNCC and became one of the most dedicated activists I have ever known. In many ways, Fannie Lou Hamer became the soul of the Mississippi movement. I remember her words.
The only thing they can do to me is kill me. And it seems they've been trying to do that just a little bit at a time since I could remember. Now, John Lewis, let me tell you, if you're going to come to Mississippi, you can't come down here and stay for one night. You got to stay for the long haul. I know Mississippi, and you'd better be ready to move in.
November 22nd, 1963, I was on my way to Detroit when I heard the news came of President Kennedy's assassination. I thought of Medgar Evers, who championed voting rights and who had been assassinated a few months earlier, and the little girls killed in Birmingham, and now the president who represented so much hope. For many months, I kept my emotions bottled up to be strong for those counting on me to lead. But there I sat in my room, watching the funeral in the dark, alone with it all. Lyndon Johnson delivered his first speech as president.
No memory or eulogy could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest possible passage of the Civil Rights Bill for which he fought.
I'll admit, I had some preconceived notions about President Johnson. He was a Southerner, a Texan, and he had blocked civil rights legislation when he was a congressman. But I had to give him a chance. President Johnson moved quickly on his promise to pass a civil rights bill. But pressure was put on us to halt demonstrations. We disagreed. We shifted our focus on Mississippi and the right to vote for every person. When we arrived in Washington, D.C., Robert Kennedy visited me to offer his support. I addressed the news media knowing that news coverage was essential.
This summer, we're presenting the federal government with the opportunity to act. We plan to install 1,000 workers in Mississippi. They will teach at the freedom schools and community centers. Registering to vote is an act of commitment to the American ideals. It's patriotic. The federal government must decide if it wants to let Southern Negroes register. It must make that choice this summer.
In April, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was created with the goal to go after not mock votes, but real votes. The Klan burned crosses. 3 young civil rights workers, 2 of them white, went missing. In June, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law. In Mississippi that summer, we suffered more than 1,000 arrests, 80 beatings, 35 shootings, 35 church bombings, and 30 bombings total.
But a movement is fueled by passion, and we had plenty. The entertainment community came together for us. I remember one night in the middle of the summer, the movie star Shirley MacLaine came to visit in support, and she stayed for one of our parties. I danced for an hour with her.
John Lewis, you are too sweet to be in the movies, but I love dancing with you.
It was a wonderful evening until I had 2 beers and passed out.
August 1964. The bodies of the 3 young civil rights workers were found buried. We informed President Johnson and told him of our plans to elect delegates to go to Atlanta. We were tired of attending funerals and memorials. We wanted freedom. The Republican Party nominated Barry Goldwater, who was no friend of civil rights. It was in this shadow that President Johnson mapped his path to re-election. Our delegates arrived in Atlanta. Dr. King and I came along to support them. Fannie Lou Hamer was our spokesperson.
I was arrested, and in the cell, 2 Negro men were forced by the guards to beat me. Then the guard beat me. All of this on account of wanting to register to become first-class citizens. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave? We want to live as decent human beings in America. Thank you.
President Johnson had preempted her speech for a press conference, and we were incensed. But it worked against him. Her testimony was on national television. Her testimony shook the nation. All the news stations across carried it the next day. We were offered only 2 seats at the convention. It had been a gesture to appease us and not enough. But wasn't enough. We refused. The 2 chairs were simply removed. To me, the 1964 Democratic Convention was the turning point in the movement. We played by the rules. When we arrived at the doorstep, we found the door slammed in our face. And what's so tragic is that Johnson didn't have to do what he did. He still won re-election in a landslide, and he still lost the South.
Our organization was falling apart. We felt burnt out. The singer, Harry Belafonte, wanted to help. He invited a delegation to accompany him on a 3-week trip to Africa. We jumped at the chance. Sometimes when you learn a word in another language, it changes the meaning of that word for you in your own language.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru means freedom.
Hearing that word over and over, I began to understand more deeply than ever how we are all connected in the unending quest to be free. We traveled to Liberia, Ghana, Ethiopia. The young people we met were very astute and more radical than those of us in the SNCC. On our stop in Kenya, we were approached at the outdoor cafe. It was Malcolm X, one of the most influential leaders of the civil rights movement and founder of the Islamic Muslim Mosque. He was returning from a conference in Cairo, speaking about the problems of Black people in America. He said this to us:
We must identify with the people of Africa, and they must identify with us. We must shift our attention from race to class. That is the root of the problem. The struggle of the poor who have been left out and left behind transcends race. Don't give up. This is an ongoing struggle. Be prepared for the worst. But people are changing. There are people all over the world supporting us.
it was the last time I would see Brother Malcolm alive. He was assassinated February 21st, 1965. Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize, the second African American after diplomat Ralph Bunche. I was overjoyed, but most of my colleagues resented it. Frankly, a lot of my colleagues resented me. I feel SCC becoming isolated from the movement. I went on the road, fundraising and speaking. As significant as it was, the Civil Rights of 1964 made no provision to ensure the rights of African Americans to register to vote. Dr. King met with President Johnson to discuss the need for a Voting Rights Act.
In January of 1965, we held our first march to the courthouse. No one was let inside and no one was registered, but the line was drawn. And the idea of the march from Selma to Montgomery was born.
March 7th, 1965, Selma. You are ordered to disperse. Go home or to your church. This march will not continue. Troopers, advance.
I was hit repeatedly. I thought I was going to die. I kept walking as long as I could. We met back at the church, shaken, beaten, broken nerves. I spoke to the group. I don't know how President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam and to Congo, but he can't send troops to Selma, Alabama. Next time we march, we may have to keep going to Washington. Thank you all for coming thus far on this journey. And now I'm told I have to go to the hospital to stop this bleeding from my head.
The response from Bloody Sunday across America was immediate. Dr. King requested a federal injunction to stop Alabama from interfering with the march.
Hundreds of ministers, priests, and rabbis were on their way to join them.
As John Lewis lay in the hospital, a second march was underway. Willie Ricks from Tennessee took over and re-energized our movement.
If the sheriff says don't march, what are y'all gonna do?
We're gonna march.
If George Wallace says don't march, what are y'all gonna do?
We're gonna march.
Yo mama says don't march, what are y'all gonna do?
We're gonna march.
Since we had no injunction from the federal government, Dr. King made an agreement to march to the bridge, then turn and go back. It was known as Turnaround Tuesday. Some of our people were outraged. George Wallace met with President Johnson to convince him to stop the Selma March. It backfired. The president addressed the nation.
With the country as with the person, what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There's only an American problem, and we shall overcome.
March 21st, 1965, an injunction was granted. 2 weeks after Bloody Sunday, we began our march.
We covered 7 miles the first day, 16 miles the second day, then 11, then 16 more.
We made camp a few miles from the state capitol and took time for a celebration, a festival organized by Harry Belafonte.
Joining us was Nina Simone, Tony Bennett, Sammy Davis Jr., Leonard Bernstein, Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was a salute to Selma.
March 25th, we reached Montgomery. We assembled at the courthouse. Speeches were given on the steps. I preceded Dr. King.
My fellow freedom fighters, as a native of Troy, Alabama, just some 50 miles from here, I'm happy to stand here and share this great moment in history. We are a non-violent revolution. We don't have guns. We don't have tear gas. The only thing that we have are our bodies and our tired feet.
But no one was more eloquent than Rosa Parks.
All of you wonderful freedom fighters, my brothers and my sisters and my children, because I have been called the mother of all of this. You have given me back my faith today.
I like to say the violence, the threats, the murders stopped that day, but they didn't. Progress, though, had been made. That day was the end of a very long road. 4.5 months later, the 1965 voting rights was signed into law. It was the last day of the movement as I knew it.
January 20th, 2009, my day in Washington, D.C. started by listening to a message left on my phone.
Hi, John. It's Ted Kennedy calling. I know it's early, but I was up, couldn't sleep. I was thinking of you and Martin. I was thinking about the years of work, the bloodshed, the people who didn't live to see this day. I was thinking about Jack and Bobby. Are you ready for today?
I'm ready. As Barack Obama was sworn in to be the 44th President of the United States, I watched and listened in awe at that moment.
Thank you, John. It's good to see you. I'll need your prayers.
You'll have them.
You ready, John? Go ahead. Lead the way.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I get a little teary-eyed listening to everybody.
Aw.
I did. The story and all of your voices just.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Well,
Donna.
we thank you, Donna, for the
Thank
opportunity.
you, Donna, for putting it out there for us.
Donna and Paul.
And Paul.
Yes, and
Both
Paul.
of y'all.
And Paul, thank you.
And
Lisa,
thanks
Mike,
to our
thank you.
Oh, no.
viewers for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of our readers. I know the spirit of John Lewis is with us tonight, and I know that he's honored by what you all did tonight. I know he's applauding, same as everybody at home, applauding all what you've done.
My mama's going.
I'm getting teary-eyed myself. So, I'm sharing a link to the program right now on the chat. So, that's your chance to give us your feedback. But we have some time for question and answer right now. So, go ahead and type in your question at the chat, and I'll see if I can share them to the group. Can the panelists read the comments?
So someone asked if how the panelists felt taking part in this. I, for one, was honored to be part of this group. It's been really fun to read this story and to hear John Lewis's experiences and kind of put more details to what happened back then.
I would echo those remarks as well. John Lewis is still, in my heart and in my mind, a hero. And he put his life on the line for me and my family. And that in itself makes me teary-eyed, Donna and Paul, because
I
this
think
man
we're all-
sacrificed. Yeah, he sacrificed everything.
Yeah.
And gave up a lot of his own body and soul for a cause that he believed in. And that's just humanity and the dignity of every person having the right just to live and the right to vote as human beings, pure and simple.
And I think seeing that at an early age, I mean, you know, the idea that how young he was when he decided to move down that road,
Right.
and to see him still, you know, not too long ago, you know, being on these different panels in Washington, just to see that progression. It's like he has come a long way. And yes, we are very grateful for John Lewis.
I know one of the things that really got me was reading this, literally going through this, especially as an immigrant, because just last October, I presented a resolution to my Diocese of California, and it's called Support of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Resolution that passed a resoundingly unanimous vote. We took it to Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and to Congressman Cory Booker, and we're like, we've got to pass this. It took 200 years, and nobody has passed it. It's 200 years, 200 attempts. So I feel I am carrying on what the late Congressman John R. Lewis has started. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for all that you're doing.
Amen.
For me, doing this reading, I was excited just to have a chance to interact with theater again in any way, shape, or form because of the pandemic. Also, it was great I always enjoy supporting ABLE because as a fledgling at the lab, they were the first people, Lorenzo, in orientation to reach out and to make sure that I had a place to feel welcome and included. And also my mama, whom I'm excited about, was able to tune in tonight from Virginia. My mama marched, and the town that we were from, the counter protests that are mentioned, one of those chains was Woolsworth. My mama took me as a 3 or 4 year old. I don't know how old I was, but we marched on Woolsworth. And she got that from my grandma, who is also an activist, and my great aunt. And they marched for just equal treatment in factories, equal wages, not going through the back door when we're supposed to be integrated in the town that I was from. And lots of other family members, community members, and friends. So it's just a long line of activism. And I just really treasure being able to lend a voice or several voices to that and to those who took some part in that movement. So it meant a lot.
For me, this was such a great opportunity. And, you know, moments like this really remind me of the people who came before me. We had the great Melba Beals, who was one of the original students who was part of desegregating schools and who attended a school who was being desegregated, come to the laboratory and speak one time. And I remember watching her speak and talk and how she was told by Martin Luther King Jr. that she was doing her work for generations yet to come. And I remember being so impacted by that because I'm like, I'm one of the generations that was yet to come for the work she was doing. And so being part of this reading was another moment for me where I'm like, John Lewis was doing the work he did for the generation yet to come. And so it's amazing to remember that and honor that. And a great reminder for me to do that for others, to lift up and build inclusion, to make sure that diversity is at the tables I have a seat at, and to continue that work.
Okay, we got a question here from Lisa Tromovich. Hi, Lisa. So would Donna share with us the process of creating these scripts? And another related question is, how were you able to edit the 3 books down to a 45-minute script? It was well done, by the way, Donna. Yeah, bravo.
Bravo, Donna. Bravo.
Oh,
It was my honor to do this. And it was not easy because everything was relevant, everything was interesting, and yet I knew I had to cut certain parts of it. I would encourage anyone that wants to read more to please read the books. So I would go through book by book and I would take notes. And this is the first graphic novel I've adapted. So it's very visual and it's hard to see some of those visions. You know, the beatings, everything, it's hard. And then the words, but it was my honor to do it. And I'm sorry I had to leave anything out of the story. I loved the beginning, especially learning about his childhood. And then I loved book 3, the final march, and, you know, his moments with President Obama.
One of our
go ahead,
former students, I was going to say, one of our former students basically has a question. And you all may remember Rachel Brooks. But what was your favorite part line from this reading and why? Anyone want to answer that?
I just like responding to AJ on a bull on the megaphone.
Yeah.
AJ just brought it with the props.
That was awesome. That
And
was
she just brought it out of
that
us.
part.
Just laying around in my closet. You know, everybody has a bullhorn. I think Willie was, oh, sorry, go Tony.
I was just going to say, for me, it was reading about the nature of the violence that took place. My family is from Mississippi, and Bahia and Red Bank, Mississippi, and in Memphis. And, you know, I only heard certain stories. And, you know, I started to think more about them. My great aunt was on here tonight, and she raised me. My mom is on here as well, my uncle and family members. So, and my daughter, Rachel's my other one, and they just basically really try to be here to support me, and seeing them here was beneficial for me. But yeah, the just reliving in my mind all of that violence. And then I brought it even full circle to today, and seeing, you know, all the shootings and things of that nature, unarmed Black men, you know, just it grips me. But it also makes me want to fight in the right way. Good trouble.
I think for me, it was the part where they spoke about coming with their bodies, all they had. They weren't armed. Their bodies and their steps, their tired steps. And I contrasted that with the incident we had on January 6th. For me, that's what it was.
I just think, I again like to thank Donna, because I think you gave us this emotional journey pulling out those sections. So there was a lot of it that was a roller coaster, so to speak. And so that's what I liked about the whole thing. I think, you know, that little bit of humor, that was also good. I think that took us down that humorous path. But I liked it all. I liked it all.
Someone was asking, my mom actually, hi mom. Linda was asking about the group and how we were put together. So I know AJ mentioned Able, so I don't know if Lorenzo or Monique, you want to talk about Able?
Well, ABLE was this African American body of laboratory employees. And it's designed to, as AJ said, to kind of reach out to people, African American or people of color, or anybody that wants to actually join and learn learn a little bit about Black culture or participate with Black culture, and we do different events to try and do some fundraising. We try to put on different speakers and just talk about Black lives, and that's for the laboratory. And there are other organizations that similar to that. The women's organization, there's the American Indian, there's Pride, and so on. So there's a number of them, but ABLE is what we use to support each other.
And to offer scholarships. We offer scholarships.
Scholarships, if we can get the money donated. If we can get the money donated, yes.
There's a question here about the graphic novel aspect of it. Like when you were reading March, what was your first thought of history being written or told in graphic novel, in comic book form? What was its effect on you?
For me, it was very powerful because I open any page, and this particular page does not have a lot of dialogue, but I know what's happening. I can see the marching, I can see the beating, I can see the emotion on people's faces. Other pages, it's almost all dialogue. So I think it's an interesting concept. I would like to, it makes me want to read more graphic novels, where before I was less interested. So I think they did a very nice job with it.
I would agree with you, Donna. And I think what he wanted to do is to make it available for all generations to be able to look at it. And he can capture a younger generation to remind them, with the comic book style. However, it did have a lot of the violence, but it's history, it's reality, it's factual. Right. So as a result of that, all of those things are important. And he just used the illustration as a mechanism to reach a younger generation, to possibly get them to understand about their history more and much, much, much better, because we all weren't taught our history from a real perspective.
That's what I was going to add that to that, Tony. It's a story about that history that's not being told, and this is just going to help kind of put that history together in a better picture.
I know it made me go back to literally reading the history from the newspaper clippings and the various places where they were, and it was very traumatic. But it worked because it needed to be, because that's what it was.
It's like you didn't hear much about the Fannie Lou Hamer. I wonder if my aunt was named after her. Her name is Fannie. But you didn't hear much about her. And I thought that article you sent, that was
yes,
eye-opening for me.
Yes. Yes.
I try to put everyone in the moment of where we were and try to find some history and things of that nature. But I'll have to thank my mentor and good friend, Donna Crawford, for suggesting this while she was on. I don't know if she's still with us, but she reached out to me and Donna, and then basically just asked if we can do this.
I was like, she's still there.
Yeah, oh, I see her. She's still there. But thank you, Donna, for suggesting this to Donna. And I appreciate all these folks here at the laboratory. They opened their hearts and their minds and said, I'll volunteer to do this. So Jennifer, Lorenzo, AJ, Julia, and Monique, thank you for volunteering. I really, really appreciate you all for, you don't know how much. I don't get enough times to tell you all, but yeah, thank you for everything that y'all do.
Tony, it was personal to my cause.
Yes, it is. Y'all ought to know that. Jennifer would tell us like it is.
Well, I'll echo AJ's thoughts. I have just loved being a part of ABLE because I kind of looked around the lab watching ABLE for years and joined a couple of years ago. And being a part of ABLE has opened me to opportunities like this, and it has been so cool. And so I appreciate ABLE and the way that you guys reach out to the lab, and just the community that ABLE provides. It's been awesome.
I can say it's nice to see the younger folks, because I'm one of the oldies who ran ABLE years before you guys came, and it's just wonderful to see the activities and the creativity you have really given to ABLE. I'm just really proud of you all. Yeah, really proud.
And I'm still happy Monique is helping me through. I lean on Monique all the time.
Well, soon we'll be passing ABLE on to the next leaders, have that.
And I was thinking about that today, Monique. It was the idea of, man, now I feel like that old man sitting on the porch looking at the younger generation coming on, taking over. It's like, this is great. This is great.
Not taking over. It's like you're John Lewis. You're passing down a legacy.
Taking over. Yes.
Transformational leadership.
Amen. You're passing the baton.
Yes, passing the baton. Just
And
like
to
I
that
got
topic, we got a question here that's related. What advice would you give to young students who are looking for ways to become activists here in Livermore and the larger community?
I would say get involved. Oh, go ahead, AJ. You were going to say something? Go ahead. Oh, yeah, your mic.
I was going to say,
AJ, go ahead.
I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say, as someone who just, like I said, presented a resolution that's been accepted, getting behind those legislative acts, just getting online, looking to see what's there that's already been promoted, and look to see where your passion is. What gets you, and get behind them. It doesn't, I always say, I have knees that have been replaced, so I can't get behind the protest line, but I sure can get behind legislation and my representatives.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that in the sense of follow what your passion is. And there's plenty opportunities for you to volunteer and be involved. Even in Livermore and the Tri-Valley, there's a Tri-Valley for Black Lives. And that is one, the group reached out to Lorenzo and I and wanted to feature just some of our laboratory staff on their social media. So they wanted to represent and showcase individuals who can basically represent the laboratory as well as the community, and also be a role model possibly for others out there. So, and I'll have to say, activism, it takes a lot of passion, it takes a lot of heart. So you have to be prepared to volunteer because you're signing up to be a service to others. And we saw that in leaps and bounds, unfortunately, after a tragic murder of George Floyd. But that brought a lot of people together. It really did. So I'm appreciative of having the opportunity to volunteer whenever I can.
I know we're up against it, but I do want to try to get through all the questions. We got a question here from Rena. Are there still barriers to voting in some states? And I think there's still a lot.
Yeah.
And I know that
and more,
they're
yes,
still trying to erect
more
barriers.
being produced. That's correct. More being produced.
Still gerrymandering. Oh gosh, people getting lost with registration, polling locations being moved at the last minute, polling locations being an unreasonable amount of distance away from the designated person or person's home. That's a long answer to yes. Yes, there are still problems.
The number of polling locations being reduced
Yeah.
also. Yeah.
We definitely saw a lot of efforts during November's the presidential election. We actually saw a lot of suppression being enacted and tried with the post offices being limited and all the shenanigans with the mail-in votes, and yeah, they really tried hard. But
well, they still are, because Arizona, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and some others are starting to put together bills in the state that and Florida that takes away people's right to vote in general. And they're trying because unfortunately this past election opened up a lot of concerns for those who don't necessarily want everybody to have that right.
Well, I think I think we should wrap it up. I do see a lot of compliments from people here. Just again, wonderful. If people want to reach out to, is it through can they do it through Able? Is there a way that they can contact you through Able or?
Yeah, Monique and Lorenzo, I noticed somebody was talking about donating to the scholarship fund. So would you give them a link?
I'll put my email in the chat and you can just
thank you.
Me and
that was Sandy. I was trying to find her on the server to get in touch with her.
Yes, certainly they can talk to Monique, they can talk to Tony, they can talk to me, Julia, any number of us. They will be directed.
And I'll add to that, we're revising the diversity, equity and inclusion website at the laboratory as we speak. And, we hope to have it next month. And you'll be able to send email to any of the actual 10 employee resource groups that we have at the laboratory, because we've been able to set up an alias for each and every one. And, that email goes directly to Monique. Is hoping it's not her, but it goes to Monique and not Lorenzo, and to the new body of people that are coming in. So yeah, I'm just teasing Monique, and she knows it. She and I go back to some warm memories. I won't mention those memories, Monique, but warm memories.
So I think I recruited the upcoming leaders of Able. So I feel no strife with you teasing me.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
Yeah.
I'll have to admit, Paul, before we leave, you freaked me out when you put the last picture on. My screen was like, okay, what are the words? I didn't see nothing. It's like, what do I do? So I start fumbling with my paper, trying to find, do I have another line? So I panicked. It was like, wait, where'd my words go?
I knew exactly what happened to you. Oh, one other thanks we should give is Michael Rice as well, because he gave us some valuable feedback, I think.
Yes, he did.
I mean, wouldn't you all agree?
Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
was useful, Michael.
And to Paul, is it Paul who had did the second rehearsal with us?
Yes.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. So thank you. It helped us basically sort of hone in a little bit more and helped our wonderful AJ get into character so well. So yeah, you don't know how much we love AJ. So
Just so you guys know, this
Is this recorded?
Yes, it is. It is recorded, and I'm okay to say
Still
it.
recording. We're still recording.
This broadcast is going around the world. My aunt in Australia is watching.
Oh,
Her, I gave her a shout out.
Yeah. We've got Kansas City, Missouri, my cousin in the house. We've got, yeah, this, I'm loving how far this went.
Virginia.
I think you have somebody in London for me, UK.
Wow. Wow.
we are an international event here.
International,
That's
correct. All right.
All right. Well,
All righty.
to thank you to Donna, to Jennifer, to Julia, to AJ, Monique, and Lorenzo and Tony for a
And Paul.
powerful evening.
You're welcome.
And yeah, more power to you.
Cheers.
More power to
I have
us.
my wine now,
Yes.
so cheers.
Now celebrate.
Here.
Well,
All
and
right.
thank
Hey,
you to
Tony's
all
mama.
everyone who attended. Yes.
Miss Wakana.
Thank you to everyone's family who joined. That thrills me. I know my daughter's out there and many, many of my friends are out there. Thank you all. I'll see you all
Thanks,
tomorrow,
Rachel.
right? Because you're gonna
All
get,
right. Well,
I'm
have a
coming.
good evening, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Good night, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Love you, family.